The bait's prepared, the tackle's ready, and guess what? I know just the place. And this is it. Here we are, Avery Lakes, Dagenham in Essex, courtesy of Steve Morgan of Mainline Baits. And we've had a look round today. It's early in the season, not too many people here. And Steve says that if we're quiet, we can get them to feed right in the margins. Let's see if he's right. This is a lovely sight, you know. Surface feeding carp. Strange really, I mean they're a bottom feeding fish, yet here they are, like they do in a lot of places, taking surface bait. And it's a terrific way to catch a carp.
Well, you knew Chris a long time before I did, Kev. You went back to the late 60s, early 70s with Chris through the BCSG connection and the social connection. What are your earliest memories of him?
I do remember various things with Chris in the early days. There was a very famous meeting that was held that Chris had a lot to do with. I mean, he may have been the main organiser, I can't remember, but all the big names of the time came to it. Dick Walker, Pete Thomas, Jack Hilton, Jerry Hughes, who was editor of Angler's Mail, countless famous names that you never got the chance to meet really, unless you were very, very lucky or fortunate. And Chris managed to get them all there in this one pub, Golders Green.
Was this the Crooked Billet?
Yeah, the famous thing, and you got to meet all your heroes. I mean, you know, Walker had caught the record carp, and he was there with Pete Thomas, who'd landed the fish at Redmire. So it was an auspicious occasion.
Yeah.
I suppose it was like going to the coronation or something like that. Yeah, huge.
Close again, a fish. I think that's it. There goes the float. Oh. That was lucky. He shot off at high speed, but for some reason decided to turn on his own without too much pressure from me. Again, going quite deep. The fish still feeding, see? One of the troops are missing. Classic sign there of sort of group behaviour you get with carp. Frenzy of feeding, even though there's a hooked colleague close by. I don't realise. Again, deep water here in the margins. Beautiful take that. He came up very slowly, not splashy at all. Very leisurely. Now there's the float. I haven't actually seen the fish yet. Just trying for the side of those reeds. Ooh, steady on, steady on. Sort of longer, leaner fish, this one. There he goes. Another really pretty one. They are marvellous scrappers, these. Right, keep out of there. Right, it's coming a little closer. Again, he's not big, but look at the scrap he's putting up. I think this one is scrapping more than the last one. There he goes. Right, losing ground now. He won't have it yet. Yeah, it's getting tired now. He's not the only one. Okay, he's nearly there, I think. There we go. Just tease him over the end. Look at that great big scale on its side. That's it. Wow, what a super scrap that was. In fact, he's smaller than the last one, I would say. Look at the colours of that fish. Almost sort of pinky on the top, grey, going to this wonderful gold. See the ends of the fins all tinged with red. There you go. Big scale. That's that big scale I saw in the water. Huge great scale in the middle of the body. There we go.
I first met Chris in the early 1970s as a young man when we both had dark coloured long hair. I travelled to a British Carp Study Group meeting at Staines that Chris had organised. I'd just joined the organisation, and I remember walking into the pub, having had what was a vastly different drive across London from Essex in those days to the one that there is now. And there was Chris being as enthusiastic as I always remember him being, very respectful, laughing, telling stories. And that's always been my recurring thought of Chris, just what a great bloke he is or was. I always remember the particular evening that I introduced Chris to Miles. We were at Sandown at a show that we'd organised. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember it well. Yeah.
I said, have you met Chris, Miles? And Miles said, no. So I said, well, you're about to. And go on, you pick it up, because I think it was quite amusing.
I'd obviously heard of Chris. I've always had an interest in the sort of historical side of carp fishing, and like I said, Derek introduced me to him, and down at Sandown, and the Saturday nights down at Sandown, traditionally we all went out to the Chinese for a meal, and fortunately I got myself sat next to Chris, and he started talking, and the crispy wontons came out. He carried on talking, the soup came out, he carried on talking, and the next 5 hours just went by, and Chris never ever stopped for breath. He just talked for 5 hours solid, which normally any other person I've ever met in my life, that would have drove me mad, but he was so knowledgeable and enthusiastic, and a great raconteur, has been said before, and I was just spellbound for 5 hours listening to him. I could have listened to him for another 5 hours. It really was fantastic.
In 2021, Tim, who had been the president of the Carp Society for several years, decided that he'd served his term of office and he wanted to stand down. And it was really, there wasn't any debate about who we should ask about who would be the new president. Someone said it's got to be Chris, and of course it was Chris. I think the thing that kind of was a little story about Chris that kind of sums up that period of time. I used to regularly phone him anyway. Any question I needed answering about the history of carp fishing, a particular lake, an item of tackle. Chris was always my go-to person, and very occasionally he would say to me, I don't know the answer to that. And then he'd say, but I'll get it for you. And he always did. He'd phone back a couple of days later with an answer. Anyway, this particular day I phoned him up and we went through the normal day-to-day banter. Hello, how are you? And what you've been catching. And I said, Chris, I need to ask you something. Anyway, we finished that part of the conversation. He said, so what do you want to ask me, Derek? And anyone who knows Chris will know that he had an answer for everything. He would bounce back at you if you shared a joke with him, like he'd hit you back with a one-liner, wouldn't he? So I said to him, Chris, we'd like you to become president of the Carp Society. And for the first time in many, many phone conversations with Chris, it went quiet. So much so that I was sitting on the phone thinking, has he fainted? Like, has something happened? And I said to him, are you still there, Chris? And he said, yeah, I am. He said, Derek, he said, are you serious? You want me to become president of the Carp Society? And I said, yes, we do. He said, well, of course, I think I'm going to need to take a little while to think about that. Yes, I've done it. Thank you very much. And that was kind of, and to be honest with you, I've known, and this is not a judgment on any other previous president of the Carp Society at all, but he took that role with such enthusiasm, didn't he? Yeah. He kind of embellished the whole thing of, how important it was. He talked to people at events on our behalf, and he was the perfect person for the job, to be honest.
Yes, fish close to it there now. Gee. He had a good look at it. And he's just taken a bit from behind there. And the bait in relation to the controller is about at 10 o'clock. All right, we'll have to put, there it goes. Now. He really did come on the blind side, that fish. Oh, that was a close call. Come right down deep in front of me now. Yeah, this one is pulling. I said that about the other ones. There we go. Another mirror. Is there another fish that fights like this? No, it's only a carp. Really trying to beat. There he is. I think we might be lucky this time. Just. There he goes. Oh, he's a little bit bigger, that one. Another beautiful pinky gold one. What a lovely fish. Between 10 and 11 pound. Just lovely. Oh, the mirrors are beautiful. The commons are, but the mirrors are lovely. There he goes.
So where did you meet Chris?
I met Chris first, Jan, at a BCSG meeting. You remember the ones that used to be held at the Crooked Billet?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Well, Pete Springate invited me along.
Oh yeah.
And I was in awe of the people I was sat with. There was Bruce and Richie and Pete and Kenny, and I just couldn't. I'm sat amongst these guys that I've always thought were my carp idols, I guess.
Yeah.
And I was so desperate to join the BCSG, but Chris was there, being Chris, going from table to table as he did.
Yeah.
Fantastic bloke, I mean, so enthusiastic. Even back, that was in the late 70s.
Yeah.
And I just used to bump into him continually after that, I guess, fishing various lakes all around the Yateley area, really.
When I met Chris on the banks of Yateley the season 1980, and I was walking around doing my usual thing, and he sort of whispered, said, yeah. I said, what? And he said, are you going to give it a go? And I said, yeah, I'm giving it. He said, so am I. He said, but I don't know where to start. He said, I don't know whether to start over the road or here. I said, I'm starting here. This is on the Match Lake. He said, have you seen anything? I've seen anything. There's loads of them in here. There's absolutely loads. And he said, really? I said, get up that tree. So he got up the tree, and he's looking over the thing. And I said, no, I can't see anything yet. I said, no, they're really funny fish in the Match Lake. They hang around about 2 foot below the surface. And so he's looking, he's going, no, I can't see him. Honestly. I said, look, you've got to look deep into the water. And he was looking, and he went, oh my God. He says, there's bloody hundreds of them. And he said, I'm fishing here as well. And he picked the prime spot. And so the first day that I ever fished with Chris, he caught a brace of 20s, and he was ecstatic. Well, you imagine what it was.
Yeah.
From then on, we always used to, every sort of capture or anything, we always had a celebration, you know, and it was one of these celebrations. Well, I tell you one of the really strange ones that we had, included in the celebration, would be Chris and his wife, and then there was Yatesy and his wife, and me and my wife. And at about 10 o'clock at night, there's a knock on the door. And so Chris says, "What the bloody hell's that?" So he went out, there was chatting, a bit of a chat, and he came back in again, and he walked straight past it. He said, "Mike Oyez's son is outside with Richard Walker's rod that he caught Clarissa on, you know, and he's selling it." And I said, "Oh," so it was me and Yatesy was standing there going, well,
What a bizarre evening.
yeah. So anyway, so he goes out, he goes, he gets the money. It wasn't a lot of money, you know. So he came back in again with this rod. And of course, you know, it's just. But also, he said, he's got this. He gave me this, and what this was a Mitchell reel, but on the back of it was a brass plate presented to Richard Walker for winning the competition between him and somebody called Swale or something.
Oh yeah, what, Dennis Swale? Was it Dennis Swale?
I think so. I don't know exactly, but he was he won this competition right at the last knockings by catching a barbel of 7 pounds or something.
Wow.
You know? And so we had this, you know, and of course we're waggling it around, and I said to Chris, I won't mind borrowing this and catching a 20 out of Yateley on it. And he said no. And then Yatesy said, "Yeah, I wouldn't mind borrowing it and taking it down to Redmire and catching a fish on that rod." And he said yes.
It's 26.5 pounds. Beautiful leather. Beauty. Suppose there's the other side. What a beauty. What a beauty. One, here's another two. This is this one here on the right hand side, that's 22.25, and this one's 21. Both on the top. Chum mixer and 6 pound line. Both of them quite fat. This one here is a male, completely different colour in here. It's a lovely golden one. This is a real grey one. This one's got the spawning bumps as well. Two beauties. They are. Well, we're looking for bigger ones than this. This will do to start with. What age? No. Yeah, she's going to be back in a minute. There we are. 22.4. There you go, little mate. Six. One gone. Alright, around here. And she is 21. Okay, mate. Goes. It.
Yes, it's hard to believe that it's 35 years plus since I first met Chris. I know you've known him for years, Brian, but I think he was one of those figures that I always saw in angling magazines, heard whispered about. He was one of the well-known anglers, and I didn't really expect to meet him. I'd won a competition to fish at Willow Park with Andy Little. It was through Course Fishermen, and it was either you could have, I think it was £50 a bait, and even despite being a Yorkshireman, it was either that or fishing the day with Andy Little. Now, Andy Little was one of my big four, along with Kevin Maddox, Rod Hutchinson and Richie McDonald. And I thought, you know what, I'll have a day with Andy Little at Willow Park. Now, it was well before I'd got a driving licence, so I actually had to catch the train down to Willow Park, which was Aldershot, stayed at Andy Little's house, and we went to Willow Park. I think I'd had 2 or 3 bad years of fishing winters up in Yorkshire. As you well know, it wasn't easy.
I could vouch for that.
It was terrible. And all of a sudden, I was catching carp after carp after carp in the winter, which really was down to the water and Andy Little's help, not my ability as an angler. We'd fished We'd fished the weekend, and I'd gone down with just one set of clothing: black jeans, much like today's, black jumper, Kevin Maddox jumper, but in black. And after 2 days, well, certainly one night, potentially 2, I was covered in slime. And Andy said to me, because I expected Andy to run me back to the train station, and Andy said, "Oh, we've got a friend coming down to see us." I said, "Who?" He says, "Oh, Chris Ball." And I thought, wow, I've met Andy Little, and now I'm meeting Chris Ball, another legendary angler, which I didn't expect. And in the morning, Chris came down, and as usual, Chris looked so dapper. He had the nice jumper on, the jeans, the barber boots, a picture of elegance as he always is. Now, he'd also got his camcorder with him as well. Which
I've seen some of the clips.
Yeah, it's amazing. He had the camcorder, and I think probably that would be one of the first times I ever appeared on, I always say video, but the youngsters won't know what video is. It was the first time I was on film, and Chris came along, and I was so pleased to meet him, and we had a couple of fish, and Chris did the filming, and straight away I thought, this bloke is more enthusiastic about my fish than I am, and I was enthusiastic about them. And I expected Andy Little then to run me to the station, and because Chris lived near the station, Andy had arranged for Chris to take me to the station. And I thought, wow, this, if you were a footballer, it would be like David Beckham running you home, whoever your footballing near is. So we loaded the car with all my gear, and of course I was covered in slime. And I thought to myself, wow, going to the station in Chris's car. And Chris said, "Oh no, we're not taking you straight to the station. You're going to come to my house." I'm like, "Come to your house?" You just don't get things like that. So off we went, and I can't remember where Chris lived. It could have been Camberley, but I'm sure Chris and the family will forgive me for that. And as we turned up at this lovely house, there's Mrs. Ball at the door, and as usual, sartorial elegance as well, a very regal lady. And I thought, oh, crikey, we're going inside. So we went inside, and I'm sure Lynn will forgive me. The house was immaculate, it was beautiful. And if I'm allowed to say it...
And you weren't.
I certainly wasn't. It was, shall I say, very M&S. It was certainly a league above what I was used to. And I thought maybe we'd stay in the kitchen. I was ushered through into the lounge, and the sofa was there. It was a beautiful white, and I remember it now, white and pink floral pattern. And I looked at my trousers, I looked at me, and I thought, am I really going to sit down there? And we sat and we chatted. And it was only when I thought back many years later, I thought, poor Mrs. Ball has seen many scruffy, wet, damp, over-enthusiastic carp anglers, just not me. So it was a really good way to meet Chris. And as I talk about later, not just a fisherman, the carp historian, Mr. Carp, but Chris to me was always the family man and a man who inspired me to be a better person.
Chris and I shared a passion for surface fishing, and we lived opposite ends of the country, but we were basically developing our thoughts about floater fishing at the same time. So it became quite logical that I would write to Chris and Chris would write to me and whatever. I just wish I'd kept some of the letters now. But what I did keep, and which was fascinating, was that Chris was way ahead of me on filming. just general fishing things. And he'd taken some footage of carp feeding off the top. I think it was Raisbury, Longfield.
It was, because actually I had been with Chris, and Chris being enthusiastic, he'd taken me to Raisbury, he'd taken me to Longfield, and he'd filmed this. So unbeknown to you and me, you were seeing the footage that that Chris had recorded whilst I was with him.
Possibly, yeah. And I mean, some of the best for me was some close season stuff where he'd literally spent hours feeding carp chum mixer. Now, this was in the early days of particle floaters, and we were learning how fish reacted, how fish fed, and things like this. And to sit at home watching and re-watching time after time some of these big carp coming up and taking the odd mixer and turning and swirling, and
because this was well before the days of underwater films, or even the professional films.
Yeah, way before.
Yeah, way before that.
And I mean, some of them were a bit shaky and a bit blurred, and they whiz from one fish to another. But overall, we're watching this stuff that Chris had sent me, and I'm learning so much about how to present a floater bait and things like this, and so our sort of friendship circled completely around floater angling, and then sort of out of the blue, I get a phone call from Tim Paisley.
Oh yes, that would be probably in the early 90s when Tim was did the Carp in Depth series.
That's right.
I'd been asked to write the one on carp waters, and I think the obvious two people to write about the floater fishing was.
That's what Chris was saying. He was saying, right, the two of you get together, and one of the books, Floater Fishing, will be from you two guys. And I thought, wow, I'm no longer just passing on messages and phone calls and things like this and sending letters. Let's get together and do this properly. Of course, the issue was distance, in that he's one end of the country.
Aldershot versus Hull.
At the other. And so we said, right, halfway down the M1, Donington services, I'll travel down, you travel up, we'll meet in there, we'll grab a coffee. An hour later, all jobs, I've got some notes, he's got some notes, off we go. That's roughly what happened, except our 1 hour conversation and writing notes turned into over 5 hours. And we did produce the book. It's a small book, it's a part of the series, but it's a book that I'm immensely proud of. And the interesting thing is, there are still things in there that I think are valid today, in sort of particularly things that Chris developed and was from his filming. Because I wrote an article for Carp World called Earthslip, which was all about the stages that fish fed. And in truth, I got a lot of those stages, not only from my own observation, but from these films from Chris. Because it was a case of you'd watch them come up and they'd miss one, and they'd perhaps sample the next one, and then they'd take the next, and then another fish would come in. And there was all these things going on that we were studying from Chris's film. And it was brilliant. And, you know, that's how we got to do the book together.
About sort of the early 80s, I moved to Guildford, very close to where Chris was. And although I'd been fishing at Darenth and Savay and places like that, I now felt that it was time to sort of explore the sort of local waters, Cutmill, Hollybush and the like, and of course the magical Frensham. And Chris said, come on, look, we need to get together with Jan as well. And we started to certainly attack quite a few of the waters. Hollybush was one of the first. We discovered tiger nuts, the hair rig, and chemically sharpened hooks. What a combination. And we actually took the place apart. And it was quite good really, because we fished this area called Plank Island. And Chris being left-handed and me being right-handed, we could share a swim on the end of this little island. And God, some of the catches we had was fantastic. It was really exciting stuff. We could see these shoals of carp coming through. They'd drop down on our beds of tiger nuts, and very often we both be playing a fish at the same time. But as always, Chris has an absolute passion for surface fishing. And it didn't take him very long before he started to wander off just with one rod and a bag of chum mixer and started catching them off the surface. I'm sure that Chris had shares in pedigree chum mixer, the amount he used to buy. But what a surface angler he was. He caught from everywhere. I remember one winter he actually was catching them out of a hole in the ice on the surface. Quite something, you know, especially back then. And then, you know, we started to think about a little Frensham. It was a bit of an alien water to me, being public. It was very busy. There was always lots of people around. In the summer, it was the families would go down there, they'd be swimming, and they'd actually be all over your baits. Peculiar place to fish, and it was strewn with snags. And Chris said, right, this is your task, you've got to get this sorted out. We're losing too many fish. You know, got to get it right. And to be honest, I failed miserably. I lost, I think, every fish for the first couple of weeks, and eventually started to get together with it a little bit, find out areas that wasn't so snaggy, didn't fish so far out, was changing. We went in with a slow dissolving bait, which certainly helped get the fish on the feed, because it was very silty there, and they would mill around in the mud. And eventually we cracked it, and we really did crack it. We caught some absolutely fabulous fish there. I think out of at the time, 50 odd stocking or whatever there was, you know, probably had 3/4 of them, which was great. There wasn't many fish that we didn't catch. Jan joined us as well, and that was mainly in the summer.
Oh. One man, Mick. Yeah.
Years, 2 years hard work, 36.4. Dear old Raspberry.
20th of June, 1988.
Yeah, 20th of June. Probably one of the biggest fish in the lake.
Beautiful.
6-pound line and dear old chum. What a fabulous fish. Right. Get the rod.
Let's have a smile from the lucky captain.
What a fish. What a fish.
We first met when I applied to join the BCSG in the winter of 1970-71. I'd started carp fishing in 67, caught my first carp in 68. And at the time I think I'd had over 60 carp, of which 45 or so were over £10. So I applied, and because Chris was the local organiser for the BCSG, he was sent to interview me. And on a conversation with Peter Mohan, who ran the group, Peter had commented to Chris that I must be a liar because nobody outside of Kent ever caught so many doubles. So don't laugh at the number, because by today's standards it's pretty rough. Anyway, he came to the house. The interview went very well. Chris had fished the same water, not a problem. What made him stay a bit longer and made him come and visit me a few more times is we made some very strong homemade beer and some very strong rice wine, which Chris quite liked. Well, when I first met Chris, he was the printing officer, and the first BCSG mag was duplicated, and Chris started doing printed covers for it. Beyond that, when I became involved, I actually got the magazine properly printed with photographs. So we both became printing officers for the BCSG.
Feels like a good fish.
Chris Ball had been trying to gain membership of the Golden Scale Club for some time, but he kept being rejected on various grounds. But then he acquired the rod on which Walker caught the record, applied again, and on the understanding that the Walker rod came under the auspices of the Golden Scale Club, so to speak, he was admitted membership, but given an extra name as a member. So what are your memories of the start of all that?
It was like that, but it wasn't quite like that, because he the reason he wasn't going to be a member of the Golden Scale Club was simply that he didn't have a cane rod, you know, and because that was your sort of passport. And but I'd been fishing with him a few times, and he'd become quite a good angling pal. I used to see him down French on one or two other waters, and then one day he phoned me up and said he just had a call from Mike Oyez's son to say that to ask whether he'd like to purchase Dick Walker's rod, because Dick Walker had given Mike Oyez the rod. They just handed it down to him and said, "Look, I've got something for you," because Mike had been helping him with a I think on a water of his own, of Dick's own. Anyway, he'd done some favours for Mike Oyez, and so Dick Walker gave him the rod, and then Mike Oyez left home, and it was under a bit of a cloud, and the family didn't have much money, so they offered to sell the rod to Chris for £180. That was the going price, and that seemed a lot then in 1982, and so Chris phoned me and said, would you like to share the cost of this rod? And I said, and that's when I got the idea. I said, look, you've always wanted to be a member of the Golden Scale Club. If we buy that rod, you know, I'll have a third share with you, and you allow the members to have a cast with it, perhaps just one cast at a water of their choice. Then you're in, and that's how it became. So I stumped up 60 quid, which was, you know, equivalent of £600 now, I think, probably in today's money, and then he became a member of the Golden Scale Club. But I said that obviously you can't be Chris Ball. You are, and you always have been, Darbishire. And he's Darbishire. And he didn't know he'd always been Darbishire, because I used to fish with, you know, friends before we even formed the club. Everybody had a kind of nickname, and I always thought, because he was always so enthusiastic, and he would get very excitable, which I quite liked, because I get excitable when you're talking about a big fish, but he would just go over the top a bit. And so Darbishire was the name of the sidekick of a hero of ours when we were. This is people of our age now. You know, in the 70s, will remember a TV series called Jennings and Darbishire, which was about two schoolboys. And Jennings was the hero, and Darbishire was the one who was always in the background, sort of trying to get the hero to, go on, you can do it, you know you can do it, and encouraging the hero to go through, and it normally ended disastrously. And I thought, this is why you are called Darbishire now. So he was always Chris Darbishire Ball.
This time, yeah. Keep going. Come on, he's yours. Okay. Oh, wonderful. First one. Would you say 20?
Yeah, that's a 20. Well done.
Yes, lovely. Richard Walker would be proud of his old rod. Still doing service, still mastering the monsters. Well done. Oh yeah, beauty. I think he's going to smile for you. He seems to be in a very obliging mood.
Just get a couple of shots there.
Then can be away. I don't think it matters which side you take. They're both good sides. All right, we're going to move that around a bit. There we have an English common carp, courtesy of Redmire. There you go. Bye bye, boy. See you again. See you again in 10 years when you're a 50-pounder.
I didn't meet Chris until a Carp Society function in the mid-80s when he'd won the quiz.
Mm-hmm.
That famous picture of Fred J, Brian Mills, your mate Len Arbery, who you co-authored Redmire Pool with, and Chris. And I think that was 86, 87. We may have met in passing, but that's the first occasion I can remember actually meeting Chris. So you'd known him 15, 16, 17 years before I even met
No, it
him.
won't be much. Was that what year did you meet him?
86, 87.
Oh, 86, oh, right. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
Because, sorry, not to interrupt, there was that little bit of, you'll remember, there was this bit of us and them with the Carp Society and the BCSG CAA connection.
Yeah.
And he was Peter Moyne's right-hand man for a long time, wasn't he?
Time, yeah.
Till Maddox came along.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I know that Chris, he didn't join right at the very beginning. I think there were about 28 people who joined when Moyne put it out that he wanted to start this group. And he only put it out that he wanted to start a group because there was another carp organisation at the time, a small elite group, and he'd applied to join them, and they'd back-heeled him. They wouldn't let him in.
Right.
And,
Was this the Carp Club?
Yeah. And they wouldn't let him in, and he was bitterly disappointed about it. And he contacted Eric Hodgson, who was, I think, the chairman of the National Association of Specimen Groups, and hoping that Eric could lend some sway to him, them changing the mind and letting him in. And Eric said, well, just start your own group, Sodom, start your own group, so to speak, which he did. So, and Eric helped him to begin with, and they put it out that there was starting this new carp group. And I think there were about 28 turned up to the inaugural meeting, and Chris wasn't one of them, but Chris soon came on board, and by about, they issued these newsletters to begin with, and by about the third or the fourth one, Chris had come on board and been very, useful in because I think he was something to do in the print game.
Oh, was that Print Connections?
Print Connections,
yeah.
Chris. And he offered to print a more professional-looking magazine, so they made him the magazine editor.
Yeah.
And I met Chris not long after that, because I joined about that time, just when that magazine or the one after came out. So a couple of years after it started, I joined. And the memorable occasion of me spending a lot of time with Chris, I might have bumped into him at like the Golders Green do and Capestone, but the one that sticks in my mind was when it was one of these do's in London. They had these conferences, and I went back to Chris's house. I got talking to him, and we found we'd got a common bond in Redmire Pool.
Yeah.
Really strong bond in Redmire Pool. And he said, well, come back to my house and I'll show you my photo album, my Redmire Pool photo album. Went back to his house and looked through his album, and he'd managed to get in touch with a lot of the people who had fished up to that point and get the fish captures if they'd caught fish and get photos, and he'd put them in this album, which was, quite mind-boggling to me in them days. And that bond that started there, obviously, carried on over the years.
When you think about it, it's not really talked about as a pivotal period, but the Redmire Syndicate started the same year that the BCSG started, in 1969.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Initially we were doing all sorts of jobs, but when it all settled down, we were each doing our own part, and we were doing it very well, and it was integrated very well in that respect, wasn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. And because it led to, and one thing I mentioned it in one of my write-ups of Chris, but I always remembered about Chris, at the drop of the hat, he would come up to meetings.
He would.
And he always went home the same day.
He did.
Chris.
He never stayed
over. Never stayed over.
I always offered him, stay overnight. Chris.
No, living down in Surrey, that was quite a hike, wasn't it? And he did it without complaining, always did it, always there when he was needed.
Yeah. Chris, we've got a bit of a problem, mate. any chance you can come up, one day next week? Yeah, I'll be there. What day do you want me?
Yeah, good as gold.
He was.
And of course that led to our other mutual achievement, which was this one, a century of carp fishing, which I think looking back, because you had to hit the end of the century, didn't you? You had to cash in on the millennium.
Yeah, everybody was doing it.
Everyone was doing it, yeah, and it was a very, very complicated thing to put together. But you see, the fact that you and Chris have always been historians was and is a huge influence on me, because Carp Fisher was the first magazine I was involved in, and it struck me then, and it's not in retrospect, it struck me at the time that what we are doing now is tomorrow's history, or the end of today's history, and it goes very, very quickly. So everything that happens may be of significance. You have to record as much as possible, so you've got a record of the things that really count, and that stuck with me from producing the first Carp Fisher in 1981, and it made that so meaningful because we were able to draw on you for stuff from the start of the century, which we didn't have, and then we could go to different people. I'm going on a bit here, you can come back in a minute, but what I did find, we commissioned people to write about the 60s, and said, no, you did the 50s and 60s, was it Walker's Decade and whatever, Borley did 60s, I think, so I'd got 70s to do with someone and 80s to do, and people can only write about themselves, so it is exceptional what you and Chris did. I've got a number of Chris's books. Never did a book about himself, did he?
No.
Chris, you've never done a book about yourself. You did Carp Fisherman, you've done Century, you've done Redmar Pool with Len. So most people, a book is a thinly disguised ego trip, isn't it? Aren't I great?
Well, I suppose for a lot of people, who spent their life fishing, there's a number of reasons why they might want to write a book about their fishing. It's part of it might be an ego trip, part of it might just be to put on file their fishing life,
which I've just done with memoir.
It might not be anything to do with ego, really. It's just they want to leave something. Most people want to leave something of their life, don't they? Yeah. So but I've never. It's never.
No, but that's looking back. And I was back on it the other day. It was exceptional that you two guys did all this great research and these great books, always about other people and the history of it, and all that's brushed up. The number of times I've been in touch. Have you got a picture of whatever? Now, just the same with Borley, and you'd always got them between you. You'd always got them. It's quite amazing the research you'd done and what you'd come up with. So what I'm going on about there is that it led to this, which to me, this is quite an amazing book. You can't get older copies now. Quite an amazing book, and it will be the only one of its kind. Because how on earth do you do a book about the 21st century?
Yeah.
When the time comes, you can't, can you?
You won't think so.
No.
So what you're saying, I won't get a footnote in that one.
No, what I'm saying is that, like that, as a weekly, that as a record of a century, will be the only one of its kind to me.
Hello, my name's Chris Ball, and welcome to this two-part video on surface fishing for carp, or as it's known as these days, floater fishing. It's something I've been involved with now for many years, and perhaps what I'm best known for. Witness more pictorial evidence, this time supplied by Richard Walker. In the late 50s in Angling Times, he produced an article there which showed, really for the first time, carp in the margins taking crusts from the surface. In this case, the lucky angler was his friend Pete Thomas, and he caught a 16-pounder for the camera. This encouraged more people to catch a carp on the surface. After all, Walker and many others had written about it, and after those super pictures in that Angling Times column of Walker's, here was real evidence that you could go out and catch a carp on a piece of crust.
I had an interview set up, and it was going to be with Chris.
Yeah.
And Chris said, make sure you bring all your albums along.
Okay.
Because I've been fishing the Match Lake for quite a few number of years. And been fairly successful on there, I guess.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, okay, and no problem, Chris. So I took my albums with me. Now, my interview for the BCSG really comprised of, what would you like to drink, Rob? Oh, well, I'll have a pint of whatever you're having, Chris. So we got 2 pints of bitter. I've got my photo albums. And he was sat there going through everything. And which fish is this? And did you know that this one is the third biggest in the match lake?
That's right.
I don't really remember having an interview. I think it was just Chris looking through my albums, which was fantastic. You know, it was...
He'd obviously done his research, if you like. You know, the knowledge that he had of carp fishing was just phenomenal. He'll never ever be replaced.
No, not a chance.
Superb.
Well, Longfield at last. 15th of August. Got a bit of chum again. And a third. Yeah, that is the one. That is the one. Yeah, 33.4. What a fabulous fish. Take a picture around the front here. You're quite close. You're just going to be all right now. Yeah. And one from the other side on the tail there. Looking back from there. That's lovely. Great.
Beautiful.
That's the one. What a fish, eh?
And not only were you corresponding, Brian, I think it went beyond that. I think you both ended up working on the same thing at the same time without knowing it.
Yeah. Oh, this is one of my amazing memories of my time talking to Chris and whatever, in that I think we both came to the same conclusion that using bog standard jummies and whatever was starting, lots of people were starting to do it, and we wanted an edge.
Yeah.
So we talked about possibly adding flavours or colours to the mixes and whatever. So I think independently we started working on how we could do that. Now, roughly at the same time, late 80s, early 90s, I was invited to take part in a filming exercise, a general carp one called Carp Part 1.
Yeah. One with Martin James and Richard McDonald.
Richard McDonald, Bill Cotton and whatever, and I did the floater section on this. And I talked about how I flavoured mixers and how I was putting dye in and shaking it around, putting it in a plastic bag and then adding water and flavour and colour, inflating the bag up, tighten it and then shaking it around like this.
And I don't want to worry you, but we always used to laugh and say, it's Brian doing the glue sniffing again, because it looked like it.
Yeah, that's right, exactly the same. Now, Chris, I was telling Chris how I was doing it, and he was saying, I'm doing roughly this and everything else. And at the same time, he was then filming his 2 videos, the floater fishing for carp.
Yeah.
Parts 1 and 2 and whatever.
Yeah, the original video with Len Gertz.
And I got hold of copies of these. And one of the first things in there is Chris talking about flavouring mixes.
Yeah.
And completely independently, we were doing almost exactly the same thing. And there's Chris in his video with a large plastic bag,
inflating it,
blowing up this bag and shaking it and saying it goes clear.
Yeah.
And there was me in another video, completely different part of the country, blowing in the bag and shaking it up.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah, it was amazing how the two things were done at,
exactly the same time.
Almost exactly the same techniques, completely different parts of the country at the same time.
Yeah, he was probably a man in carp fishing, and I've tried to emulate, to be as excited about other people's captures as he was his own. He had the briefcase. Now, normally when you see somebody with a briefcase or a phone or a wallet at conferences, you dread it.
I never saw you at a conference with a wallet.
No. I kept it hidden. You would dread it because they just wanted to talk to you about what they caught. Chris would have pictures of everybody else's carp, and he was so enthusiastic about that. And I think that's what we should remember him for. Not just Chris Ball, the man who caught all these carp. His legacy is his joy for carp fishing.
And I will back that 100%.
Thank you.
A lovely fella.
Here he comes, up to the bait. Yes! Nearly made it to those reeds over there. Oh. Now, shot off here to the left, he's gone up right into this neck and going towards these reeds now. Oh, big swell. Just turned it on the back there. Try making that it to come past me. Let's pull in back those reed stems. That's lovely. Yes, they certainly do scrap here at Avery. It's always nice to get a fish on the centre pin. This is a £9 line here. And a £9 hook link as well. I've got no snags as such as branches or anything. It's just these weeds. Scrapping all the way. There we are. Just rolled on his side. Yeah, still keeping his distance. A lot of pressure on here now. There we go. Okay, we'll see if we can get him in broadside. Here he comes. Yes, he's mine. Oh, cannot believe you'll get a scrap off a fish that size. He'd be lucky if he makes £7. There he goes, lovely hook hold, I can see it from here. Well, there she is, only a little one. He's about £6 or £7, but caught on the flat controller. We had an epic battle on the centre pin as well. Again, very similar to these Avery fish. Lovely pale, yellowy, butter colour belly, especially here, see, by the root of the tail. There he goes. And we've got the sun coming out for you as well. Ah, look at that in clear water.
I mean, he was a very, very, very good angler.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
But he had no kind of edge to him, or there was nothing. He came into a room and you sensed his presence, but it wasn't one of these like, come here I am, that you see such a lot of anglers do today. It was just the way he was, and he was quite humble about it, as you said earlier. He could. I've seen him out here on Horseshoe at one of the carp schools many years ago, given the job with 30 kids around him, go and show them how to catch a carp off the top. No, I remember it was windy, it was overcast, it was everything you wouldn't want to try and catch a fish off the surface. I remember saying to him, well, good luck with that one, Chris. I'm walking away, and 20 minutes later I could hear the applause as he hooked this carp and all the kids were clapping him. That was how he was. I was showing somebody earlier today. There's when I went to collect the stuff to bring to Horseshoe, there was one of these IKEA glass cabinets, and he had some of his smaller items displayed in there in his carp room, and there was this glass dome. I said to his son Martin, "What on earth is that?" And he said, you might want to throw that away. So I said, well, he said, it's a Redmire snow dome. Literally, as you shake it up, you get the red colour of Redmire. And only Chris could collect something like that.
Yeah, that's correct. And the first person I linked up with, of course, was Chris, and they started a campaign on Little Frensham and Hawley, both of which I fished. Chris was there a couple of times, but we didn't actually fish together. And it was around that time that Chris produced his book, Historic Carp Waters, which is about Leany carp. And obviously Little Frensham and Hawley both had Leany carp in. Chris arranged a little get-together to promote the launch of the book, and there was actually a photograph taken at the time, and I've always called it a gallery of rogues. Now, I don't know if you recognise anybody there. If you don't, of course, there's Chris Yates, Bob James, Chris in the middle with the book, Dick Gaynor, Chris Sanford, Harry Haskell, and that's myself. Christ, do I look young there.
So tell us, Mike, tell us about the books that you worked on with Chris.
Well, over the sort of last 10 years, I actually worked on around 40 fishing books, which I designed, some I edited, some I was just the compiler. And of course, Chris had actually written pieces for several of these books, like Every Picture Tells a Story. He was involved with me on Remembered. The last two books we were involved with was his historic Carp Waters 2, which I designed for him at his request. I was also working on a book called Ashley Pool. I fished there in, I think, 1972. And I started compiling a book about the water because nothing much had been written about it before. But I sort of lost interest or got involved with other things, and I passed it over to Chris to edit, write and compile. And fortunately, I managed to design it for him, and he saw a finished copy just before he unfortunately died. Chris was a real inspiration to so many people. He was so enthusiastic about carp fishing, and his knowledge of the history was actually second to none. And he was always at the end of the phone if I needed a conversation. He was very, very interested when I was in Redmar. We had many conversations over that. I just don't think we'll see the likes of him again. There were so many people were so inspired by him from his talks and slideshows, and even now conversations with him. I know somebody commented that they actually managed to stop Chris talking once. Well, I can only say that was probably well done.
I sat for, I don't know, an hour, and there was the odd fish around, but I wasn't keen to cast. But I noticed Mixer had drifted to the left, further down the sort of channel, and I noticed some fish were taken there. And I made a mental note of that. Anyway, I packed up, went home, and a fitful night's sleep. Next day, I said to the wife, I've got to go back. Got to go back. So lunchtime, I went back, came in, there was a fella in the spot where I was the day before. Well, I walked further along the bank where I'd seen these fish as I'd left the day before, and sure enough, there they were. And put bait out, and one took, then another one, put a bit more bait out, and it's that wonderful situation that I call World War III. And they were all over the place. Went back for the tackle, met a fella I knew on the way back who said, can I come with you, Chris? I've got a camera. I thought, well, that'd be useful, you know, if I did get one, take some pictures. And he stood about, I don't know, 10 foot behind me. It was a difficult spot to fish. And anyway, after several near misses, all within 5 or 6 minutes, suddenly it's gone. And unlike the one the day before, this one roared off to the left, and I thought it was going to get stuck further down the bank, but I managed to shift it and it moved out in front. Big battle again in front. The vortexes were getting larger and larger, and eventually netted it. And we got everything sorted, and I went down for the fish, brought it back up to the unhooking mat, and the second time in 2 days, somebody with me has said, not 30 pound, my friend said, well, that's 35 pound. And when I looked, it was a bigger fish. And when we put it on the scales, it was 36.5 pounds, 36.8. This had dimensions of, from nose to the fork of tail, of 35 inches. So to the edge of the tail, end of the tail, 3 foot fish with a girth of 28 inches. And to catch two, mid-30s on consecutive afternoons in the middle of March is something that certainly I've never done before. And in fact, when I mentioned it to a pal a little bit later on, he said, I'm not sure if anybody's done that, but they probably have. But for me, a real high spot, and of course, caught in adverse conditions, and two cracking fish. Well, amazing. After yesterday's 33, 17th of March now, on a single piece of mixer right under the rod tip, 36.8. How about that?